Good morning. I'm Dr. Avis Jones-DeWeaver. Just ahead on News One Now, Prince death investigation. Autopsy results show the singer died from an accidental overdose. Dr. Murray Riggins joins us to talk about prescription addiction and the dangers we all may face. Doctoring the community. An emergency room doctor looks to tackle gun violence before victims end up on his operating table. Celebrating Black women, HelloBeautiful.com is ready to introduce you to some amazing Black women at the forefront of creating change in the community in their new web feature, Women to Know. Birth of a Nation discussions continue. Roland's conversations with Nate Parker continues as they discuss the legacy of Nat Turner and how Parker brought his heroism to life in the highly anticipated indie film, Birth of a Nation. News One Now starts right now. The long-awaited autopsy results on Prince reveal the 7-time Grammy winner died from an accidental overdose of the opioid fentanyl. The 57-year-old music icon was found dead 2 months ago at his Paisley Park estate in Minnesota. The report released by the Midwest Medical Examiner shows Prince self-administered the opioid, which is 50 times more potent than heroin. The drug is used mainly for cancer patients. However, it is wreaking havoc all over the United States, with people obtaining it illegally, overdosing. Federal prosecutors and the Drug Enforcement Administration are investigating how the 112-pound singer obtained the drug. Joining us on the panel today, Dr. Cleo Manago, behavioral health expert and CEO of Black Men's Exchange, and Yolanda Young, columnist and attorney for lawyers of color. Joining us on FaceTime from Gadsden, Alabama, is Dr. Murray Riggins. He specializes in addiction medicine. Welcome.
Welcome.
So could you tell us a little bit about this drug that took the life of someone that so many millions of people all around the world hold dear? What is this fentanyl?
Well, I'll tell you, fentanyl is an opioid, and we use it basically for people who have intractable pain. That's the kind of pain that's so strong they just can't live life without being in excruciating pain every minute of their lives. So when used correctly, it's a very big help. If used incorrectly, well, you see what happens. It can cause death.
Wow. And one of the things that I find very interesting about this particular death is it's been reported that people aren't really sure when Prince took this. We know that a few days before his death, there was an emergency procedure that he underwent, apparently probably connected to this drug. Is this something that you can take one day and make a mistake and maybe take too much of it and then days later perhaps die from it?
No, typically it's taken in conjunction with other drugs, and it's sort of like a cocktail of different drugs, and they're all opioids, and it can cause death because it causes respiratory depression. That is, your body just stops breathing, and typically what we find is people go to sleep and they just don't wake up. More than likely what happened on Prince's flight where they made the emergency stop sounds like he might have had an overdose then. They gave him, they made the stop, the paramedics came, they administered what we called an antidote, Narcan, revived him, and he felt better and went on his way.
Wow.
I have a question, doctor.
Yes, sir.
They're saying that he died from an overdose. Typically, when someone is overdosing, you can see signs of that occurring in their bodies, like their speech is slurred or something's going on. And people that were with Prince shortly before he died, like within a day, didn't recognize any of these symptoms. How do you explain that?
Well, it depends on what type of overdosing. First of all, if you're taking the medication, it depends on how you're taking it, by mouth, are you injecting it? So if you're injecting it, the overdosing is very insidious because you don't really have those signs that you just mentioned. You just basically go to sleep and don't wake up. It was my understanding that Prince was at home by himself after like 8 o'clock that evening, which is sort of strange, but they didn't find him till the next morning in the elevator. Typically, when people overdose, they're in their bed.
Yes.
So I don't know how he wound up in the elevator or what that was all about. But typically, that's what happens.
They're also claiming that he self-administered. They weren't there, so that's a speculation, isn't it?
Well, typically, yes. Fentanyl is something that you can take, as I said, by mouth. We used to put it in, when I worked in the emergency rooms, we used to put it in, like, you would have it in lollipops. If you had a kid with a big laceration that you wanted to sew up, you give him what we call a fentanyl lollipop while he's in the emergency room. And he'll lick on the lollipop in a couple of, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes. He's calm, you know, then you can go on and you can do your procedure, whether it's lacerations or resetting a broken arm or whatever. So there's different ways. So if he's by himself, yeah, he probably would have self-administered.
Can you also distinguish between one who has an addiction that is due to pain versus those who are recreational have recreational addictions?
Well, basically, first of all, very good question. And the history basically dictates how they became addicted. We have what we call the accidental addiction patients. They start off with a pain. They have a blown out knee or whatever. They're a football player, a basketball player, and after the knee is repaired, they're on pain medicines in their rehab, and then 6 months later they're addicted. I had a very good buddy of mine who was a colleague, who was a physician in Columbus, Ohio. That's what happened to him. Guy was a vegan health nut, had an injury during his rehab, became addicted to Percocets, which is a narcotic pain medicine. Now we have those people then who are what we call just trying to get high. They're trying to get turned up. They're trying to have their party. And after a while, they do this time and time again, and what happens, your body builds up a tolerance. So the amount of medicine that you use the first time to get high, now it's not doing the trick. So you have to do more. And as you do more and more and more, you expose, your body generates more of these mu receptors in the brain, mu receptors. And these are the receptors that the heroin, the narcotics attach to give you that feeling of what we call euphoria or high.
Doctor, I have a quick question about just our sort of focus in terms of our pharmaceutical industry. It seems to me that in this country, pharmaceutical companies are really good at treating symptoms. They're really good at treating pain, but they're not good at curing what's causing the pain. It seems almost as if it's a money-making scheme to just keep people addicted to drugs. Do you think we really need to change our focus in terms of how we treat chronic pain in America?
Most definitely. But here's the situation. It's like fighting an 8-headed hydra. First of all, you have patients that come in that are in pain legitimately. And as you treat that pain, over time, everybody responds differently to the pain. And over time, some become addicted. You don't know how many or what's the percentage who will become addicted, but you're trying to treat the pain. And if you've ever been in pain yourself, you know, look, when you're hurting and hurting seriously, all you want is relief. Now, you can do meditation or you can do, some type of imagery to try to separate your mind from your body. But the bottom line is you're hurting so bad, you can't even think straight. So what happens, we have a pharmaceutical business whose job it is to sell product. So they're going to push that product, and as their profits go up, their board members and investors are happy. As a consequence, the patient's sort of caught in the mix because they want more pain medicine because, as I said earlier, their body develops a tolerance. So you see, it's like a perfect storm because the patient wants more medicine, the drug companies want to sell more medicine.
Mm-hmm. And just in a few seconds, if you can give some advice for any of our viewers out there that might be undergoing chronic pain, what can you do to help to ease yourself off of these medications instead of being consistently dependent upon them?
Well, we've in Gadsden, Alabama, we have a clinic called Restore Medical Clinic. And what we do is we use a medication called Suboxone. And Suboxone is a medicine that's been approved by the FDA to help people do exactly what you've just asked, get off the narcotic pain medicines to where they can't even function in life. And we've been having significant success. In fact, across the country, people are now getting the help that they need to get off these pain medicines. It's just not mind over matter. Some patients come in, they feel like I should be able to do this on my own. I should just concentrate. No, there's physiologic factors, there's physical dependency factors. You know, so you need to get some professional help.
Got you. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Riggins.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Another big story we are following this morning comes from Ohio. That's where a man was awarded $22 million after being beaten and locked in a storage closet by 2 East Cleveland police officers for 4 days. Arnold Black was arrested in 2012 for allegedly transporting cocaine in his pickup truck in East Cleveland. One of the 2 arresting officers severely beat Black and then took him to the precinct. But instead of putting him in a jail cell, he was locked in a storage closet to hide his injuries. But there was no toilet.
The door was like, anybody hear me? Anybody? I gotta use the bathroom. And they said, and nobody never answered. And I just looked in the locker. In the locker.
As you just heard, Black spent the next 4 days in that storage closet with no toilet, and he was only given 1 carton of milk to drink the entire time. Though the police had no evidence to support their case, the Ohio man was still indicted for possession of cocaine. That case was dropped a month later. Black filed a civil lawsuit against the city of East Cleveland for his 4-day episode, which include malicious prosecution, abuse of process, battery, false imprisonment, supervisory liability, reckless, wanton, or willful conduct, and civil conspiracy. Robert DiCello, the attorney representing Arnold Black, says his client's injuries were so severe he suffered memory loss and he had to undergo brain surgery. DiCello says this kind of abuse is nothing new in East Cleveland.
There was a policy that we found, that we uncovered at the city, that had been going back for 3 chiefs, that had people being essentially abused by the police.
The jury delivered its $22 million verdict in the civil case on Tuesday. East Cleveland officials say they plan to appeal. Still here on our panel to discuss this are Dr. Cleo Minago and Yolanda Young. Well, it looks like here we go again, right?
So there are 2 interesting things about this case. First, typically, to be able to appeal a case, you need to have raised objections during trial. Apparently, the attorney who was handling this case didn't show up.
Right.
So the appeal process will be a curious one going forward. The second thing we need to know is everything is associated with voting and who we put in charge in municipalities, like who those judges are, who the legislatures are, because my fear for the state of Ohio and municipalities in Ohio is that they are getting really, really good verdicts. However, there might be a movement underway to curtail the legislation so that there are caps on these verdicts. So while already we see that police aren't being indicted in these sorts of cases, we may be at risk of losing another opportunity we have to seek justice.
Looks like the only opportunity, unfortunately, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, all I can say about this is that what you just mentioned about the importance of local voting and making sure that people are in control of who policies their lives and who missions laws in their community, that we reiterate the importance of local voting and getting involved locally so people can take charge of who governs their lives. Because a lot of people in our community believe that the president, as we've said many times on this show, that the presidential election is the only one to think about, and they don't know what's going on in their own backyard. I think about Ferguson, where a predominantly black community was letting a bunch of white racists who were much smaller in group run their lives. They didn't govern their freedom. That's not necessary, people. You can actually determine who gets to govern your life in terms of laws if you vote locally.
And this case to me is just so egregious. It's to me, it's a human rights violation. This man was kidnapped.
Another one.
He was kept against his will for 4 days with no food, 1 carton of milk, no access to facilities. I mean, this is a human rights atrocity. And, I'm just really wondering, at what point will we as a nation say enough is enough? You have people that are going crazy over gorilla in Ohio, but when it comes to black people, I'm serious. I'm talking this true.
Oh, I know.
But when it comes to black people being abused or killed, even our children, there is like,
but even
crickets.
that cliche And those crickets are a lot of black people being silenced. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like I said the other day on in another conversation, we keep complaining about the redundancy of racism, which is like complaining about the clouds in the sky on a blue day. They're gonna be there.
Yeah.
What you gonna do is my question. Are we gonna act like we're just slaves and that we're just subject to other people's whims? Or are we gonna act like a powerful people and take control of our lives to defend ourselves and regain self-respect? Because see, it's easy to just get mad at white folks for being racist, but it's time for us to step beyond the noise of racism and be self-respecting black people and raise children to be that way.
Absolutely. And Yolanda, you know, what can you do, even though they got this $22 million ruling, some of the things that I mentioned, to me, they really require a higher level of law beyond the state. Is there anything that these people can do in terms of the federal government to bring other charges against these officers?
Well, in a city like East Cleveland, the Department of Justice, in terms of determining whether or not, you know, this was discriminatory, it's difficult because probably a lot of the people involved in this were also people of color. There just becomes a time when local governments and local citizens have to take control of their lives.
That's right.
That is what this comes down to. You know, and you see this all across the country. You know, you see, you know, all of the things that are happening in a state like Louisiana, where, you know, currently there is a jury bias lawsuit underway, where they don't have public defenders that can enough public defenders to handle cases. So people who, you know, don't have, you know, can't make bond, they're spending months and months in jail, and those charges may not even be legitimate charges. And so citizens, everyday citizens, have to take control of their lives.
And the Louisiana example is a great one, because didn't they just pass a Blue Lives Matter bill in Louisiana, which would make killing a police officer a hate crime? And we know, you know, come on now. Really?
Exactly. It's almost like a slap in the face, because of course you know that in Louisiana they already had the highest penalties and punishments for those who in any way assault or attempt to assault police officers.
Absolutely.
Avis, I want to reiterate an underlying problem here, and I'm being redundant on purpose because white supremacy is redundant. We have to start getting our people to understand that their importance, their relevance, to unlearn the myths that come out of the culture and the media that teaches that something is lower in value about them. I mean, this guy got $22 million because he was able to win a case for normalized treatment of black men in this country.
Right.
That's not unusual. But we have to stop just whining about racism and step up and act like we're have some value. Because, for example, Jews said never again.
Right. They
have a mantra. It's like, you're not going to mess with us again.
Right.
We don't have a mantra like that has been normalized in the culture. We have to develop a mantra as well that says never again. Not Black Lives Matter, but don't mess with us.
Got you. I hear you. You're exactly right. You matter. Hear from an organization that is looking to make outdoor activities fun again for our children. An urban doctor who says gun violence is a public health crisis talks about his work with at-risk kids to keep them from becoming another statistic. Actor and director Nate Parker continues his conversation with Roland about his highly acclaimed film, Birth of a Nation. For the latest news, stay up to date and informed at newsone.com. Hit me up with your thoughts on Twitter at Sister Scholar or at News One or on our News One Facebook page. It's 18 minutes after the hour. Stay with us. We'll be right back.